Moving on to verse 32, we read, "So too a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side." Now we have a Levite. So as soon as this person who's listening to Jesus, the expert in the law, hears a Levite, he's thinking, oh, again, we have a Jewish person with whom I can identify, someone who even serves in the temple. Maybe he'll be the hero of the story. But he too passes by on the other side, and we can only wonder, is it for similar reasons to why the priest did not help? Might it be that it was easier for him not to help after watching the priest not help? We know from many studies that have been done, once people see other people not helping, there's more of an inclination not to help. We don't know, but what we do know is that he did not provide help. He moved on. Verse 33, "But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him." As soon as this person listening to Jesus heard the word a Samaritan, I'm sure he recoiled, because Jews and Samaritans did not get along well, and he certainly would not have expected him to be the hero of the story, but that's what happens. The Samaritan took pity on him. And we find this word esplagniste in the original language in this verse, in the Greek. And it says here, he took pity on him. In other passages or translations, it says moved with compassion. It's one of my favorite words in the New Testament because it has to do with being moved in the gut. That's literally what it means. Like you feel it deep down inside. It's the same word that was used in John chapter 11, verses 33 through 35, when Jesus came to the place where his friend Lazarus had died. And Jesus looked around. He saw Lazarus' sisters, who were also close friends, and he saw many other people upset. And it says that Jesus was esplagniste. Jesus was moved with compassion. Perhaps the Samaritan himself had been a victim at one point. What does it take to be moved with compassion? You don't always have to be able to identify exactly with it, but there was something within him who saw the need and furthermore went on and did something about it. We're going to celebrate Martin Luther King Jr. Day here soon, and in one of his most famous speeches, I've Been to the Mountaintop, he addresses this passage of Scripture, and he says, "The priest and the Levite ask, if I stop to help this man, what will happen to me? The Samaritan asks, if I do not stop to help this man, what will happen to him?" Verses 34 and 35. "He went to him and bandaged his wounds." The Samaritan going to the man who's in need, right? "Pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his donkey, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper. 'Look after him,' he said, 'and when I return, I will reimburse you for any expense you may have.'" The Samaritan expressed great care. He did not go with minimal effort. I don't know about you, but I found myself sometimes in life not doing the most I could do, giving a minimal effort or something a little bit more than that, but not all that I could or should give in my relationships with other people, and if I'm to be truthful, in my relationship with God. Maybe you can identify with that too. How inspiring and how challenging it is to see the example of the Samaritan who really is going like above and beyond the call of duty here. In verse 36, we read, "Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of the robbers?" So ultimately, Jesus was once again answering a question with a question. It's just that he slipped this whole story in between before he did it. Verse 37, the expert in the law replied, "The one who had mercy on him." Jesus told him, "Go and do likewise." If you listen to this carefully, you get the sense that this expert in the law could not even bring himself to say, "the Samaritan." He says, "the one who had mercy on him." And Jesus' response, and you get the strongest sense of this in the original language, again, which just doesn't come through well in English unless we put it like this: "Go and you do the same." There's a real emphasis on the word you and your part in this. And there's an emphasis for me and for every one of us to go and do likewise. I'm going to make a quick second pass through this story. And one of the things I want us to do then is see, with whom do we identify? We were kind of looking at the expert in the law and, who he would identify with. With which character do you identify? Many years ago, I heard Jeanette Cliff George say that she compared sharing the good news of God's love for us with the illustration of a little girl hopping up into her grandmother's lap saying, "Tell me a story with me in it." And That's what I think we all have the opportunity to do. That's what I think we are invited to do in this story. Anytime Jesus tells a story, is to say, there is your story, there's my story, and there's God's story. And how do each of us have the opportunity to fit into that? So if we listen through the story, there's the man going down from Jerusalem to Jericho. He was attacked by robbers. So at first you're listening to the story and you see, well, it's just a man going down the road, but then he very quickly falls into the role of being a victim. And most people don't want to identify with someone who's a victim. And so it kind of gets ruled out. We go into the next verse and we see a priest coming down the road. Certainly the expert in the law, as I said earlier, would have identified immediately there. But now this one who would be hero goes from hero to zero, and he's not the one to be considered as identifying with. Same thing happens again in verse 32. Levite, hero to zero. Next thing you know, the Samaritan comes down. No, we don't want to identify with him. Oh, but he helps? I don't know. Not sure about that. He's doing a good thing, but he's a person that I don't want to identify with. Maybe I'm back to being the man in the ditch. And so if I'm not going to want to be the zero, the priest and the Levite, and I'm the expert in the law listening, who are the other two choices I have? I have the choice to be somebody who's desperately in need, or I have the opportunity to be somebody who's graciously giving. And I wonder about this as you go through the story. With whom did you identify as we were going through that this morning? And maybe as you have opportunity later today and this coming week to read through the story again, think about what it means to identify with the different characters in this story. One thing I will say is when we are desperate, we will take help from whomever can provide for our needs. It's a recent story about a 7-year-old girl, Sailor Gutzler. She was in the plane crash with her family. Maybe some of you have heard about this story. The plane went down, a little plane in the woods in Kentucky, and in the middle of the night, this girl walks through the woods and knocks on the door of a house, and a senior adult answers the door, and he invites her in, calls the police, and she gets the help that she needs. But I'm thinking to myself, we didn't have any daughters, but I always think, would I have been even more protective if I would have had a girl than about having a boy? And then I think to myself, who in their right mind tells any girl who's 7 years old to go out and walk through the woods in the middle of the night and knock on some stranger's door? It's the last thing in the world you would think of. It's the last thing in the world you would suggest. But desperate times require desperate measures, and she needed to do this because she was in need. And fortunately, this story had a good ending for her, and the person took care of her. Going back to our sermon in a sentence, in our relationship with God and in our relationships with other people, we are called to be gracious. What? Gracious givers. And we are called to be grateful. What? Grateful receivers. Consider a situation of someone you know in need. How can God work in and through your life to be a gracious giver? Consider a situation in which you yourself are desperate right now, a situation that you don't just have need, but you have desperate need. And how can you be a grateful receiver? Let's close with a word of prayer.